You know that feeling, right? That craving for something sweet. I'll get it. Maybe it's your morning coffee or that little afternoon treat. Sweetness is just it's part of life. But, and this is the big but, we're all getting much more aware of sugar, the health impact of calories. So the big question is, what if there was a natural way to satisfy that sweet tooth without all the baggage? Today, we're doing a deep dive into stevia. It's this natural sugar substitute that's really making waves in the food and drink world. We've got a whole stack of recent market reports, some really interesting research papers here. And our mission basically is to figure out what's really driving frankly, its explosive growth. We want to look at where it's being used, sometimes in surprising ways, the benefits, and what the future might hold in this, super health conscious area we're in. Okay, let's unpack this. Before we get into the market buzz, let's just make sure we're clear. What exactly is stevia? Fundamentally, it's a sweetener, right? Extracted from the leaves of the Stevia rhabaudiana plant, native to South America.
And the key thing is, it's incredibly sweet, like 200 to 400 times sweeter than regular table sugar. Plus, it's what's called a non-nutritive sweetener, which for you listening means 0 carbs, 0 calories, and crucially, no artificial ingredients. That's a big one for a lot of people.
Right, and it's important to understand the process. It's not just like grinding up the leaves. The stevia you buy in the store, or that's in products, it's gone through refinement. They grow the plant, harvest the leaves, then they extract and purify the sweet bits, these compounds called steviol glycosides. It's all about getting a really concentrated, pure sweetness that meets strict quality and safety standards. That purified stuff is very different from just using the raw leaf, which actually isn't approved as a sweetener in places like the U.S.
Okay, got it. So purification is key. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. The market growth, it's booming.
Yeah.
Across all the different reports we looked at, the story is the same. Strong, consistent, upward growth. One estimate puts it at USD is for $0.84 billion this year, heading towards $1.36 billion by 2029. That's a CAGR of over 10%.
Yeah, and another source, we saw projects going from about $570 million in 2024 to over $1.1 billion by 2030. That's nearly a 12% growth rate each year.
And yet another sees it hitting almost $1.5 billion next year, maybe $2.5 billion by 2035.
The exact numbers vary a bit, sure, but the trend is undeniable. What's really striking is that consistency. It shows real confidence in stevia, not just as a fad, but as a long-term solution in the sweetener game. It feels like a real shift.
So why? What's behind this massive surge?
Well, a huge factor is this general move towards health and wellness. It's everywhere. People are just thinking more carefully about what they eat and drink, leading to this huge demand for 0-calorie options, especially natural ones.
Exactly. And that ties directly into managing health conditions.
Yeah.
Because stevia has such a tiny effect on blood sugar, it's a fantastic option for people with diabetes or those managing obesity or high cholesterol.
Right. And the numbers there are, frankly, staggering. Something like 537 million adults worldwide had diabetes back in 2021. And that number is expected to climb quite a bit by 2030. That's a massive group looking for alternatives.
A huge. And then there's the push away from artificial sweeteners too, right?
Right.
Natural options are definitely gaining ground. People want natural foods, and there are those lingering concerns about, potential side effects of the artificial stuff, which fits perfectly with the whole clean label thing. Consumers are actively looking for ingredients they recognize, things that sound natural. We saw a stat 72% of consumers are trying to cut back on or avoid sugar altogether.
Wow, 72%.
Yeah. And 56% of food and drinks in the U.S. are now specifically avoiding artificial sweeteners. That really tells a story.
It really does. And what's fascinating is seeing how the big food and beverage companies are reacting. It's not slow. It's happening now. There's data showing that the number of products using high fructose corn syrup, their UPCs, has dropped by over 8% in just 2 years.
Down 8%? That's significant.
It is. And at the same time, products without HFCS, their UPCs are up 4%. So you see companies like Starbucks, Coke, Pepsi, Nestle, they're not just testing the waters. They're actively putting stevia-based sweeteners into their products to meet these changing demands. It's a major strategic shift for these giants.
So it's not just about sweetening your tea or coffee anymore.
Yeah.
Stevia is showing up everywhere. Where else are we finding it? It seems incredibly versatile.
Oh, absolutely. Beverages are still the biggest chunk. Yeah, something like 37% of the market revenue last year. Soft drinks, juices, teas, coffees, you name it.
Okay.
But it's making real inroads into food, too. Think baked goods, cakes, cookies, pastries. Even things like condiments and sauces, ketchup, barbecue sauce, helping make lower-calorie versions.
Right, diabetic-friendly options, too.
Exactly. And candies, chocolates, yogurts, ice creams.
Yeah.
The list goes on. Then you've got the tabletop sweeteners, the little packets or drops. And, this one might surprise you, even personal care, toothpaste, mouthwash.
Toothpaste, really, as a sweetener.
Yep. A natural sweetening agent. Can actually be good for dental health, too, unlike sugar.
Huh. That is a wide range.
Yeah.
And in terms of the form it takes, powder, liquid, what's most common?
The powder form is definitely dominant. It's projected to be, over 43% of the market share next year. And the reason is pretty straightforward. It's just very versatile, easy for manufacturers to handle, easy for consumers to use, and it lasts longer on the shelf.
Makes sense.
So yeah, powder's the go-to for a lot of applications.
Okay, so we know what it is, why it's growing, where it's used, but how does it get from, say, a field in Paraguay or China to our supermarket shelf?
Let's talk about the supply chain. You mentioned Paraguay. China's a huge player, right?
Yeah.
A leading producer and exporter.
China's massive in this space.
But also places like Kenya, the US, Vietnam, Brazil, India, Argentina, Colombia. It's truly a global network.
It is, and like any agricultural supply chain, it has its challenges.
Right.
Weather is a big one. Bad weather can hit crop yields hard, which can, affect supply and price.
But that also creates opportunities. There's a lot of focus on sustainable farming practices, on research to improve how the plants are grown, making it more efficient, using resources better, trying to make the whole process more stable and cost-effective.
Right, constant improvement. Now let's tackle something we hear a lot about, the taste. Be honest, some people find stevia has a bit of an aftertaste, right? Kind of bitter, maybe licorice-like.
Yeah, that's definitely been a hurdle.
We saw a survey from this year. 35% of consumers mentioned the aftertaste as a reason for dissatisfaction. That's more than a third.
It is, and it's a valid point. But the science here is actually pretty cool. Those stevia glycosides, the sweet compounds, there are different types, and they taste slightly different. So stevioside might have that slight herbal note you mentioned.
Right.
But others, like ribadioside A or Reb A, which was one of the first big ones, tend to taste cleaner.
Okay.
But the really exciting stuff is happening now with newer glycosides. Things like Reb M and Reb D. These have much cleaner profiles, much closer to sugar, and the taste comes on faster. Less of that lingering aftertaste.
So they're getting better at isolating the good tasting parts.
Exactly. And not just isolating, but also producing them more effectively. A lot of the focus now is on techniques like fermentation or bioconversion.
Fermentation, like brewing beer.
Sort of. It allows them to produce specific glycosides like Reb M in a controlled way. It can be more efficient and yield a purer, more consistent taste than just extracting tiny amounts from the leaf.
Ah, okay. So that's a potential game changer for taste acceptance.
A huge potential game changer, yes. It opens up possibilities for products where taste is absolutely critical.
Of course, none of this happens in a vacuum. There's the whole regulatory side. How does that look for stevia? Generally positive, you said? Though it varies.
That's right. Generally positive, but with important specifics. In the U.S., the FDA uses the GRAS system, generally recognized as safe. High-purity stevia glycosides, we're talking 95% purity or more, like Reb A, stevioside, Reb D, those have GRAS status.
High purity is the key.
Absolutely. The EU has similar approvals for specific glycosides as food additives, but, and this is crucial, the whole stevia leaf or crude extracts, those are not considered GRAS in the US. They can't be sold or used as sweeteners, only the purified forms.
Got it. So stick to the purified stuff.
Precisely. And, regulatory support can actually drive adoption. Think about things like the UK's sugar tax on soft drinks, or France's health programs encouraging sugar reduction.
Right, those push companies towards alternatives.
Exactly. Policies like that create a really favorable environment for approved alternatives like stevia. It gives companies an extra nudge, if you like.
Okay, let's look at the map. Where is stevia really taking off? Asia-Pacific seems to be the giant here, holding almost half the market share.
Yeah, dominant. Around 49% last year, maybe even a bit higher projected for next year. And within Asia-Pacific, India's growth is particularly fast, around 6.3% CAGR.
Wow. What's driving it so strongly there?
Well, a combination of things. Definitely rising health concerns. We mentioned the diabetes numbers in India. They're very high. Plus, you've got growing disposable incomes, so people are spending more on premium, healthier products. And in some Asian cultures, there's maybe more familiarity with plant-based or natural remedies and sweeteners already.
Makes sense. The convergence of factors. What about Europe? You mentioned strong growth there, too.
Yeah, Europe's projected to have the fastest growth rate overall, actually, nearly 13% CAGR through 2030.
And that's driven by...
Partly those regulatory approvals we talked about, making it easier to use, and also, unfortunately, high rates of obesity and overweight adults, about 60% in the EU. So again, a strong push for healthier choices.
And North America.
Ah,
Still a significant market, I assume.
oh, absolutely. Significant growth there, too, driven largely by that consumer preference for natural ingredients, clean labels, and just increased awareness around low-calorie foods, partly linked to, well, rising healthcare costs. People are trying to be proactive.
Right. So who are the main companies leading this charge? It sounds quite consolidated.
It is quite consolidated, yes. You have some major players really investing heavily in driving innovation. Names like Cargill, Ingredion, especially with their Pure Circle acquisition, Tate and Lyle, ADM, HOWTIAN, GLG, Life Tech Corp. These are big names in the ingredients world.
And what are they actually doing? Just producing more?
Oh, much more than that. They're heavily into R&D, constantly working on improving taste, finding new glycosides, developing new production methods like that fermentation we discussed. Cargill, for example, has their EverSweet technology paired with something called ClearFlow, which specifically targets improving solubility and reducing any lingering aftertaste, making it better for things like drinks.
Ah, tackling that taste issue head on.
Exactly. Ingredients using bioconversion. HOWTIAN has specific blends like So Pure Andromeda, designed for beverages. Sweetener launched a liquid stevia, the Stevia LQ. It's about innovation, market expansion, collaborations, launching new tailored products, and a big focus too on sustainability, on providing standardized, high-quality products. Organic, non-GMO certifications, that sort of thing is increasingly important.
So constant evolution. What about price? Has all this growth in R&D affected the cost?
Well, recently in early 2025, we did see prices trending upwards a bit. It seems partly linked to the wider sugar market. If traditional sugar production dips, like it did in India, that can increase demand for substitutes like stevia.
Ah, the ripple effect.
Yeah. Plus, general factors like higher transportation costs globally can play a role too. It's all interconnected.
Okay, so beyond just swapping out sugar, let's quickly recap the health benefits. We talked about diabetes management. For someone with diabetes, is stevia genuinely life-changing?
For many, it really can be. Imagine enjoying sweet foods or drinks without that constant worry about blood sugar spikes. It doesn't affect glucose, HbA1c, insulin, or lipids. That can make a huge difference to quality of life and sticking to a healthy diet.
And weight management. It doesn't magically cause weight loss, but it helps.
Right. It helps by reducing the overall calorie count of foods and drinks. So if you're trying to cut calories, using stevia-sweetened products instead of sugary ones, it's a useful tool in the toolbox.
You also mentioned antioxidant activity. What does radical scavenging ability mean in simple terms?
Basically, it means the extract can act like an antioxidant in the body. Think vitamin C or E helping protect your cells from damage caused by unstable molecules called free radicals.
Okay.
There's also some early research suggesting potential anti-cancer activity from the leaf extracts, though the purified forms might be different. And some studies hint that one compound, stevioside, might help with blood pressure and fasting blood glucose too. More research needed there, but promising signs.
And just to reiterate the safety point, the purified steviol glycosides have that GRAS status from the FDA.
Correct. Extensive studies show they're safe, not linked to birth defects, genetic mutations, or cancer. And allergic reactions are considered very unlikely from food use.
So, pulling all this together,
Yeah.
What's the big picture here? It feels like stevia, starting from this humble plant leaf, is genuinely reshaping our relationship with sweetness, doesn't it? Through all these applications and innovations.
I think that's fair to say. It's offering a way to get that desired sweetness without the caloric or blood sugar impact of sugar. And given the global health challenges around sugar consumption obesity, diabetes stevia is positioned as a really valuable tool. That's why its market value is expected to keep climbing. The demand is there, and the applications are constantly expanding.
So here's a final thought to leave everyone with. As these taste technologies keep getting better, and we get these newer, cleaner stevia compounds like Reb M, how might that change our whole idea of what sweet even tastes like over the next, say, 10 years? Could we move significantly away from sugar as the default standard?